So we've shown you how to set and erase variables, as well as how to put them on specific pages inside of your project. Now let's go ahead and talk about calling variables inside of actions so that you can use those values proactively. So I'm going to go back into our menu option here on the Open To-Dos flow, which, if you recall, had a main action as well as our two nested actions here. This one is where we put that set variable. And I want to go ahead and add an additional action at the end of this called set element value. I'm going to put a wait right here because I want this whole thing to complete before I do this, because I'm going to use the variable I just set in step 3 and set an element value on the page from the variable that we just set. To do that, I'm going to add an element onto our page here. Initially, I'm going to call it selected menu, which is going to be the title of our variable. Now, it doesn't have to match the name or anything. I'm just using this as an example. And so in our to-do flow here, in our element set value, I'm going to choose this specific text field. And when I want to set the value, instead of from text, I'm going to do from variable. So I'm going to keep it at current page. And when you add a variable inside of Bildr, it's going to pop up in this list for you here so that you can reuse the same ones. So what I'm doing here again is I've selected this element. I'm saying I want to give this element the value from the variable selected menu and whatever value that variable is right now. To make sure that we're doing the same thing here, I'm going to copy this over to our profile page, paste it over, make sure I add the wait, and then I'm going to do the same thing. So we're using the exact same action that we had here. We're setting the same element and we're pulling the value from the same variable. And we've just reset this variable value here in step 3 on both of these particular flows. Let's go ahead and see this in action. I'm going to go over to our app page. And so again, what we have is our to-dos, our profile, and selected menu right here. When I click profile, what you're going to see is our full flow executes. That opens this page here and restyles this menu like this. But you'll also see, because I set a variable value of profile for selected menu, and then I set that variable's value into this field right here, this actually now says profile. And if I alternate to to-dos, it's going to do the same thing, but for to-do. And it's because I've set that value into the page. Now, setting variable values into an element is a great example because you can visually see that change immediately. But it's really just the tip of the iceberg. Many times you're going to be using variables in different ways than just setting a value into the page that you're looking at. A really common example might be using the variable's value to either update a data record, or maybe it's updating something visually on the page, depending on the value that you've given it. So to do that, let's go ahead and add to these flows an if-then logic check. We're still going to set the value of the menu based off of the variable from the flow above it, but I'm also going to then conduct a logic test. My test value number 1 is going to be from the variable selected menu. If that variable equals, we're going to say profile, which you know is what we're setting here. I want to do one of two flows. I'm going to set this menu option a specific color based off of what happens. So let's go ahead and add a new flow. I'm going to do set a style property, which sets one property, not a whole class for an element. I'm going to choose our element right here. And I'm going to say the property is background color. Any CSS property could be listed here, and then any value here. I'm going to use green. So I'm going to make the background color green if that logic is true. And then I'm going to duplicate this over for to-do selected. And I'm going to color the menu. Same exact logic, same exact element. I'm going to color it yellow. And so if I go back to our open profile, I'm going to choose our if-then logic statement there, look at the value, look to see if it's profile. If it is profile, I'm going to go ahead and say profile selected, color the menu. You don't have to populate this flow with a false value. You might use a flow called do nothing that you don't place any actions within. It's kind of a nice placeholder to keep things organized. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that just for the example here. The next thing I need to do, I need to copy this flow over to our open to-dos. I want to put it right at the end. Same logic, but I'm switching back to to-do as the value I want to check. And if to-do is selected, I want to color the menu. And we said the value will be yellow in that case. So now let's jump back over to our app. And you'll see this happens instantaneously without me refreshing the page. If I start choosing these different menu options, it's now setting the text value and also using conditional logic from that variable to deliver a specific experience that I want, like coloring that menu a specific color.